Madhava Jayo Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Damodar Ki Jai. Itai Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Devamrita Swamini Tanamne Jai Purvraksham Cha Bhakta Chanvinta Paratitapi Karanyam Yasasaya Vichtenama Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tanamne Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pujayine Nirvishesha Shinnivari Paschatya Shatanine Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 1, text number 23 and 24. Evam nivasatastasya lalayanasya tatsutan kalotyagan mahan rajan ashtashita yusha samaha. Evam nivasatastasya lalayanasya tatsutan kalotyagan mahan rajan ashtashita yusha samaha. Evam nivasatastasya lalayanasya tatsutan kalotyagan mahan rajan ashtashita yusha samaha. Evam, in this way, nivasataha, living, tasya, of him, Ajamil. Lalayanasya, maintaining, tat, of her, the Shudrani. Sutan, sons. Kalaha, time. Atyagat, passed away. Mahan, a great amount. Rajan, O king. Ashtashitya, 88. Ayusha, the duration of life. Samaha, years. Translation: My dear king, while he thus spent his time in abominable, sinful activities to maintain his family of many sons, 88 years of his life passed by. Time flies when you're paying bills. Text number 24. Tasya prayavasaha putra deshatesham tuyovamaha balo narayano namna pitroschad dayito brisham. Let's just go straight to the word for word. Here says Tasya, of him, Ajamila, prayavasaha, who was very old, putraha, sons, dasha, 10, tesham, of all of them, 2, but, yaha, the one who, avamaha, the youngest, ballaha, child, narayana, narayana, namna, by name, pitroho, of the father and mother, cha, and dayita, dear, brisham, very. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That old man, Ajamila, had 10 sons, of whom the youngest was a baby named Narayana. Since Narayana was the youngest of all the sons, he was naturally very dear to both his father and his mother. Purport. The word pravayasaha indicates Ajamila's sinfulness because although he was 88 years old, he had a very young child. It's implying, of course, that at the age of 87, he was still fornicating and reproducing. According to Vedic culture, one should leave home as soon as he's reached 50 years of age. One should not live at home and go on producing children. Sex life is allowed for 25 years between the ages of 25 and 45, or at the most, 50. After that, one should give up the habit of sex life and leave home as a vanaprastha, and then properly take sannyas. Ajamila, however, because of his association with a prostitute, lost all Brahminical culture and became most sinful, even in his so-called household life. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is reminding us that time is limited and that it is not appropriate to continue reproducing late into life. Why is it not appropriate? Besides just reinforcing a bodily concept of life as the body is coming to an end, which is, of course, illusion, but also it's very unhealthy. It's very unhealthy for elderly people to produce children late in age. Instances of defects are much higher. And so there's a natural law against it. It's not just Krishna arbitrarily waving some magic wand and making it so that there is limited time. It's the natural law that children are supposed to be produced by people who are young and healthy, and to do so later in life is just opening the door to all sorts of problems. So that's hinted here in this verse. It's implied when Prabhupada says, Pavaya Saha indicates Ajamil's sinfulness. It just means that he's very old. It's not that it's sinful to be old. It's sinful to, at the age of 87, to produce another child. In fact, there's a popular movie star who's recently done exactly that. I don't think he's 87, but 80 something, and just had a kid. Hare Krishna. But of course, our culture is about planning for the future, which is the definition of intelligence, and planning for the end of this life. Ante Narayana Smriti, the end of life, one should remember Narayan. Not exactly the way that Ajamil has done. His was a special situation. But the end of life is meant for remembering Narayan. And the fact of the matter is, if you're late in life and still got so many bills to pay and issues to worry about because of the extended family, then it'll be very difficult to concentrate on Krishna as death is coming. And there's no way to dress that up and make it politically correct. The fact of the matter is that death is a bit challenging, and the devotees plan to remove the obstacles in their way so that when death is coming, they can focus. That's what the whole culture of the Vedas is about. That's what the Varnashrama especially is about. Removing the obstacles so that one can focus on Krishna. Having a lifestyle which is conducive for hearing and chanting about Krishna. Having a lifestyle which goes through natural stages, starting with study in brahmacharya, and then development in grihastha, and then withdrawal in vanaprastha, and ultimately renunciation from anything material in sannyasa. Like a roller coaster ride. Woo! But you want to come in for a nice landing. So we should recognize that this is a natural law. It's not just Prabhupada getting heavy. Because these are some of Prabhupada's sanitized statements. He's made other statements really expressing the depravity of being old and pursuing sexual enjoyment. He's really opened up that can of worms and showed everybody how disgusting it is. But it's not just Prabhupada, laying it on us here. There is a natural law, and the Varna Ashrama culture helps us to follow that natural law and to be prepared for death. And just because that's a bit taboo in our modern so-called civilization does not mean that the natural law does not apply. Death is coming for us all. And we do not want to be opening the mailbox and looking at all the bills as we are coming to the end. It's not where you want to be. So, one perspective here, I'm going to show another perspective as well. But one perspective here is that the age of 50, as Prabhupada said so many times, one must start to withdraw. Vanaprastha, of course, means to live in the forest, to reside in the forest, as opposed to in some sort of township or city where there's hustle and bustle, where there's economic activity, where there's production and reproduction going on. In the forest, generally, there's a lot less of that. So it could be literal, being in the forest, like a Gita Nagari Dham, or it could be allegorical, to withdraw from unnecessary material activity, to start pulling back, like the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell. The yogi can withdraw from the objects of the senses. But of course, that is very opposed to the culture that we live in now, which really celebrates consumption to the bitter end. As much as you possibly can. Just keep getting more and more. Your golden years should be filled with even more sensual enjoyment. It's kind of the idea in modern material civilization. Work hard and then enjoy. You spent so many years working hard, accumulating a mass of money. It exists somewhere on a screen at least. Now spend it and enjoy this. Go on these cruises, right? Go on a cruise, eat stuff, drink stuff, buy new things, even though you're just like a ticking time bomb coming near the end. Just try to get as much as you possibly can. And even though the senses are becoming weaker as the body is aging, just get even stronger sense objects to compensate. That's why people take these pills in order to maintain an erection, to continue having sex late into life. It's because the body cannot enjoy those sense objects anymore. But capitalism always has a solution. You can't enjoy the sense objects. We'll just make the sense objects stronger. Somehow or other, we'll make more intense sense objects. And we'll give you medication and some sort of cybernetic limbs so that you can keep enjoying with this body as long as possible. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to spend the fag end of life just trying to squeeze a little more out of this old rag of a body. It's tattered and torn and stained. It's like, well, if I just squeeze a little bit more, I might get a few more drops of pleasure out of this dry, beat up rag. For many, that's all they know. For many who've spent a lifetime pursuing sense enjoyment, they don't know what to do at the time of death. They don't know what to do in the last few years. All they know is, I should try to get something more. It's quite sad. It's very sad. And so the devotees instead practice withdrawing from the sense objects, even in young age, starting with brahmacharya. In brahmacharya, there should not be sensual enjoyment. There's simply sacrifice and service to Krishna. And so that later they'll remember when the final years are starting to dawn, they'll remember, oh, I can renounce everything. Oh, I can be detached from material existence. I know that I can because I've done it before. Of course, 25, 30, 40 years of grihastha life, being right up in there with all that stuff can leave an impression on the mind. But that's why training in brahmacharya is so important, so that one remembers. Just as Ajamil, by some good fortune, remembered a little bit of his Brahminical training and named his son Narayana. Similarly, those who practice brahmacharya, later in life, they'll be able to remember that actually I don't need any of this. I have lived a life of surrender to Krishna before, and I can do it again. So it's very healthy. It's healthy forward planning. So our Varnashrama culture is about forward planning. Nowadays, of course, the practice of vanaprastha is not so common. If, of course, couples are engaged in devotional service, even in their silver and golden years, they're engaged in devotional service actively. They're unimpeded by the circumstances that they built throughout their grihastha time, then vanaprastha might not be necessary. But if after the age of 50 into 60 and into 70, there's still so much entanglement, there's still so much difficulty, so much responsibility, and it's absorbing so much time so that one cannot hear and chant about Krishna and engage in devotional service, then one must start to withdraw. It's difficult to make that shift. Unfortunately, there aren't an abundance of examples. And yet, Srila Prabhupada said it so many, many times. Some in vanaprastha, they completely leave home because generally home is where the heart is, yes, but home is where all the difficulties are as well. There's a lot going on. Ato grihaksetra sutapta vitaya janasya mohoya mahambameti. Lord Kapila says that this punkshastriya maituni bhava, this attraction between male and female and all the entanglement that comes about it, has sequential stages. And it begins with the home, ato griha. You got to have a home to have sex. because despite what the Beatles said, you can't do it in the road. We are more civilized than the animals. And to have a home, you need some land to put it on. Ato griha, kshetra. And then there's the children, sutta. And then there's the whole like social, expanded social circles. Apta vitayar janasya moho yamahamameti. In this way, become totally bewildered, thinking in terms of I and mine. So that's why the vanaprasthas should start to leave home, because the home is sort of the anchor to so much materialism, frankly. I've seen in New Zealand how some vanaprasthas, they'll travel around for a few months and then come home for a few months and then travel around again. And this way, starting to sever that attachment, starting to pass on whatever assets are there to the children, to the next of kin. Or in some cases, they would just give it to the temple, as was done in Christchurch by a few devotees, which is really nice. Then the Christchurch temple was able to rent out those houses and use it as some supplementary income for the temple instead of having to beg all the time. So, time and tide wait for no man. And it behooves us to recognize that it's time to withdraw. That's the vanaprastha life. Srila Prabhupada has said it so many times, and I know it's a bit arrogant for me as a younger man to say this, but Srila Prabhupada has said it so many times, and yet it is not a very common practice. And now on to my next point. Why is it not common practice? Well, really, it doesn't have to be. I'm going to pivot a lot here. Although Srila Prabhupada has said so many times, 50 years old, vanaprastha, no more sex life, start to withdraw. Still, that's not really the most important thing for us devotees. Let's be honest. We are not practitioners of Varna Ashrama. As much as it would be nice, and Srila Prabhupada said it's 50% of his mission, I think that we need to work on the first 50% of the mission before we worried about the second 50%. We're not exactly successful in the first 50%. But we are not followers of Varna Ashrama. We are devotees of Krishna, and that transcends Varna and Ashrama. The Lord himself says this. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the very famous conversation with Ramananda Roy. As all of you know, if you've read Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's in the Madhya Lila, chapter 8. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was advised to go meet Ramananda Roy by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And he knew this is a great devotee, Ramananda Roy, but he wanted to test him, and he asked him some tricky questions. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Ramananda Roy and said, recite a verse from the revealed scriptures concerning the ultimate goal of life. And the first thing that Ramananda Roy said, Varna Shrama Charavata. What is that verse? Varna Shrama Charavata Purushena Parapuman Vishnur Aradhyate Panta Nanyat Tatosha Karanam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped by the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of Varna and Ashrama. There is no other way to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One must be situated in the institution of the 4 Varnas and Ashramas. This is what Ramananda Roy said. That's what we do. This is how we please the Lord. And what did Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu say? We should all know. He said, Ehobhaya. Ehobhaya. This is external. This is superficial. Bahya. Bahir Nisingha, Hridaya Nisingha, right? The Lord is outside and inside. So Bahya means external. Prabhu kahe eho bahya, age kaha ara. The Lord says, this is external. Tell me of some other means to attain Krishna. This is the first thing that Ramananda Roy said, this Varnashrama. And very quickly, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dismissed it. This is external. As you know, if you've read Chaitanya Charitamrita, the conversation continues towards more pure devotional service. Ramananda Roy says, being detached from things, performing devotional service with empiricism, devotional service mixed with knowledge, selfless devotional service, and eventually they get up to the standard of devotion, which is set by the gopis in Vrindavan. Therein, finally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is satisfied. That's our goal. That's what we aspire for. The performance of Varna and Ashrama would be a nice accompaniment. But we're not going back to Godhead for being perfect Vanaprastha or sannyas or grihastas, if there is such a thing as perfect grihasta or perfect brahmacharya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says this is external, this is superficial. Does that mean we shouldn't try to apply the rules? No, as I said in the beginning, there is a natural law. It is a natural law that one cannot produce children late in life. There's a natural law that death will take away everything. And so these ashramas, they follow the natural law. And we should try to apply them as much as possible. And yet, if we are imperfect in our application, c'est la vie, because ours is a process of surrendering to Krishna entirely, giving everything that we can to Krishna, chanting Krishna's holy names, telling others about Krishna and his holy names. And this way we satisfy the Lord, and we can hope to have some of his grace and to go back home, back to Godhead. Perfect performance of Varna and Ashrama is nearly impossible. But to speak of Vanaprastha, even sannyasa, it's said that sannyasa is forbidden in Kali Yuga. It's not just some whimsical dismissal. It's just in the Kali Yuga, we're messed up. We're messed up. And so before we get upset by Srila Prabhupada's purport in this Bhagavatam verse, in which he says, at 50 years old, take Vanaprastha, and we struggle to apply that, we should remember that in the Kali Yuga, we are so messed up. Kalo Shudra Sambhava. We're all born as Shudra or less. And we spend a lifetime being very confused. And by the grace of the Lord and his devotees, we get some little inkling of Krishna consciousness. We should not be surprised that we struggle to apply the sophisticated cultural nuances of the Varna and Ashrama system. But what we can do is chant Hare Krishna very loudly and sing and dance in ecstasy and help others to chant Hare Krishna and sing and dance in ecstasy. So when it comes to the controversy about the application of Varna and Ashrama in ISKCON, my personal opinion, this is not Bhagavatam class anymore, this is just Yashadeva Das's personal opinion, is that we're pretty hopeless and we should focus on chanting Hare Krishna. Applying Varna and Ashrama perfectly is out of reach of us. Maybe by some miracle, a few generations from now, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation devotees will be so unaffected by the materialistic culture that they are born into, that they may be able to really make it happen. But I think right now, we can hardly even practice the simple ashrama, brahmacharya or grihastha. Let to speak of the more renounced ones, like Vanaprastha and sannyas. But we can chant Hare Krishna because we are very fallen. We are very destitute. We're struggling with all of our things in this world. We can chant Hare Krishna. So that's my opinion. I know some will disagree and say that we can make Varnashrama work. And Srila Prabhupada wanted Varnashrama. We also wanted very successful Sankirtan all over the world. We can improve that. I think we should improve that first, is my opinion. Then maybe later there could be some application of Varna and Ashrama. That's just Yashadev Das's opinion. Hare Krishna. So let's consider the big picture here. Although there's a natural law which compels us to be detached from things of this world as old age is coming. and the system of ashrama helps to follow that natural law, still, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's opinion is that our interest, our focus should be on pure devotional service, as demonstrated by the gopis of Vrindavan. That was conclusion of the conversation that he has with Srila Ramananda Roy. And anything that is favorable to executing that standard of devotional service, that should be applied. Perhaps Varna and Ashrama will be favorable to pursue pure devotional service. And anything that is unfavorable should be rejected. Even Varna and Ashrama. If it becomes unfavorable for devotional service, then it should be rejected. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself says, Kiba Viripa, Kiba Nyasi. No, what's that verse? Gopi Bhartu Padakamalayar Dasa Dasa Anadasa. I can't remember the first lines now. Where he says, I'm not a Shudra, Vaishya, or a Kshatriya or a Brahmana. I'm not a Brahmachari, Grihasta, Vanaprastha, or Sannyas. I'm just a servant of the servant of the servant of the gopis who are fully sold out to Krishna. This is the position of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So if those Varna and Ashrama become an impediment to the pursuit of pure devotional service, then they should be rejected. Those are two of the 6 symptoms of surrender, to accept whatever is favorable and to reject whatever is unfavorable. So let's remember the big picture here and keep our eyes on the prize. The prize is Krishna Prema. The prize is not successful material life, perfect adherence to the intricate rules of Varna and Ashrama. There's hardly even a cursory description of Varna and Ashrama in Srimad Bhagavatam, particularly in Narada Muni's instructions to Prahlad. To Prahlad? Yeah. If we look in some other scriptures like the Manu Samhita, then you'll see very intricate description of how to apply Varna and Ashrama. And we're just so far off the mark, let's be honest. In almost all cases, we're so far off the mark. We just have pretty vague application. But we can chant Hare Krishna. We can sing and dance, chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, helping others to chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, recognizing that it is especially prescribed to those people in Kali Yuga who are so fallen and low that they can't do anything else. Trinadapi sunichena, tarorapi sahishnuna, amanina manadena kirtaniya sada hari. It's for the sunicha people. That's what chanting Hare Krishna is for. Sunicha means very, very low. So, as is the case in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan, sometimes our disqualification becomes our valuable asset because we are so disqualified in everything else, because we're so desperate and pathetic in our application of everything else. We become even more qualified to chant Hare Krishna with real feeling. Trinada pi suni chena, tarora pi sahishnana. Thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street, more tolerant than a tree, having no sense of self-prestige. Amanina manadena, then kirtaniya sadahari. Krishna, my Lord, I can't do anything else. I can't apply Varna and Ashrama. I was a brahmachari, hypocritical, of course, still thinking about women, looking at them. Of course, we don't have any capacity to go and get one. I was fortunate to be in a pretty good ashram where those sort of things were restricted. You could hardly ever even talk to one. But it doesn't mean there wasn't all going on up here. And then when I left New Zealand, I went to LA where there wasn't such a strong brahmachari ashram. Then it was more practically hypocritical. So I can't do it. My Lord, this is how we chant. I'm not very good at these things. I'm not very intelligent. I don't know the shlokas, don't read very much. I don't perform the duties according to Varna and Ashrama very well. I don't have a lot of compassion for the suffering living entities. I don't have respect for authority. I try to take advantage of the institution and all the devotees around me to benefit myself. What can I do? I'm pretty pathetic, but I can chant Hare Krishna, Trinada Pi Suni Chena, Tarorivas Ishnena, Amanina Manatena, Kirtaniya Sada Hari. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. But I have full support for those devotees who really want to try to make Varna and Ashrama work, really want to, reignite that whole culture. If some devotees think that they can make it happen, I'm on your side, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I think that we need to focus on Trinada Pi Suni Chena first and foremost. That we are very low. We can't do anything very well. Every single thing we do is a struggle. And it's desperate and it's pathetic. And that's the perfect position for chanting Hare Krishna. That's our qualification. Our disqualification in material life is our qualification for chanting Hare Krishna. Sunicca. So, Hare Krishna. Before I get too worked up, I'd just like to say that there are these two perspectives, of course. There's a natural law, and Vanaprastha is just following the natural law. It's not just like some, religious imposition. You just can't keep this stuff going when you're getting old. But also, we cannot expect to apply the ashrama system. We're hardly doing the Varna system at all. We cannot expect to apply it perfectly. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has made clear that Ehobhaya, this is superficial. We pursue pure devotional service and accept whatever is favorable, reject whatever is unfavorable. Hare Krishna. Oh, I got a few more minutes. So I'm done with that point. I'm just going to reiterate some points about sex. Whenever it comes up in the purports, I like to talk about sex. And a lot of this chapter is about sex. So I'm just going to share a few quotes about sex from Srila Prabhupada, and I'll just leave it at that. Because there are standards, there are higher standards and there are lower standards. And I think that we should not demonize those who are struggling with a lower standard. We always try to progress in Krishna consciousness. No one's got a perfect material life. So the highest standard is pretty clear, and it's described by Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text number 13. The highest standard of sexual activity is none. Where he says, one should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose, thus with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life. One should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. That's the highest standard. 0. But there's also another standard, also described by Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita, the next chapter, text number 11. Right? I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire, and I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles, O Lord of the Bharatas, Arjuna. So even Krishna, in his own text, the Bhagavad Gita, in his own conversation, is presenting two different standards of practice of the sexual activity. He says one should be completely devoid of sex life, and then he says that sex life can occur according to religious principles, and that is a means of worshiping him. And then Srila Prabhupada says a few things, expressing a sort of permissive attitude towards a common standard, which is sexual enjoyment practiced within marriage. He says in the purport to chapter 3, text number 34, for example, sex enjoyment is a necessity for the conditioned soul, and sex enjoyment is allowed under the license of marriage ties. Srila Prabhupada said sexual enjoyment is allowed under the license of marriage ties. I'm just going to share 2 more references and some letters that Srila Prabhupada wrote. In a letter to Roy Ram Prabhu, Prabhupada wrote, oh, I didn't write down the year here. I'm not sure where this was. I'll have to look up when this one was written. But Prabhupada wrote, in my philosophy, there is no abstinence from sex life, but Krishna consciousness should teach us that sex life is the cause of us becoming conditioned to the material nature. Therefore, advanced Krishna consciousness students should know it well, that sex life also should be dovetailed with Krishna consciousness. Better to avoid it, if not possible, to have in a regulated married life. Better to avoid it, but if not possible, have it in a regulated married life. And then in a letter to Satsvarupa Maharaj, he said, I understand that sometimes you feel sex urges and frustration. In the material world, sex urge is the binding force for material existence. A determined person tolerates such sex urges as one tolerates the itching sensation of eczema. It's not very romantic, Srila Prabhupada. If not, one can satisfy the sex urge by legitimate marriage. One can satisfy the sex urge by legitimate marriage. Immoral sex life and spiritual advancement are incompatible proposition. So herein, Prabhupada's implying that there's a moral sex life and an immoral sex life, and that the immoral one, outside of marriage, is incompatible with spiritual advancement. Now, we don't need to promote the lower standard. There's a higher standard. Just being completely free from sex life altogether. It's unnecessary, actually. It's unnecessary for the soul. And we should always aspire for that high standard and promote it, because the lower standard happens automatically. It does not require a lot of promotion. It will happen regardless. This is what I heard directly from the mouth of my spiritual master, His Holiness Devamrita Swami. He said that we should try to promote the higher standard. He's talking specifically about sex. Even though there is enjoyment, as Prabhupada said in this purport, there's enjoyment within married life. It's allowed under the license of marriage ties. Gurudev said it's not necessary to flout this standard, to encourage that standard. We should encourage the higher standard, because the lower standard will happen automatically. It's just inevitable. So as we're reading these statements about sex, and we may be struggling with some desire ourselves, we should recognize that as long as I understand the highest standard and pursue it, then Krishna can, and probably will, bless me with success so that I become free from this attachment. If we're not aware of the highest standard, if we're ignoring it, or if we're denigrating it as some sort of impossibility, well then yes, it cannot be done. So that's why we continue to hear the highest standard, which is being free from all sexual activity. We continue to glorify it, aspire for it, encourage each other to pursue that, and then eventually, hopefully, at least by the time of death, unlike Ajamila, we can be totally free. But if we're going to make justifications and reconciliations, then it will not be possible. So again, although there are many standards of sexual activity, and it does not disqualify someone from pursuing Krishna consciousness if they're not at the highest standard, still we should recognize the highest standard and always pursue it and encourage it. That's almost always Srila Prabhupada's demonstration, as we see in his books time and time again. Although he makes these compromises in some places, we see that more often than not in his books, Srila Prabhupada is setting the highest standard so that we know it and so that we'll pursue it. Hare Krishna. I think I'll finish there. Said enough controversial things. Hopefully controversial enough to keep everyone awake. Which is what Dasi Prem said. Spicy. Trying to be spicy, yes. Well, I mean, sex is just gets you perked up, you know. It attracts our attention. And Vanaprastha, all of the ashrams, they're just in regard to sex. Brahmacharya, Grihasta, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa, they only exist in relation to sex. That's why they're there. And so let's not be naive or prude. Oh, sex, it means nothing to me. Great, then you're totally transcended the ashrama system. If sex is absolutely a non-issue for you, then you've transcended ashrama. Because the ashramas exist in relation to sex. In three of them, there's hardly any. I mean, three of them, there's none. And in one of them, it's regulated. And so let's not enter into this with eyes wide shut. Oh, my Lord, we got 3 digital hands up, which means I'm in trouble. I think Agari Krishna was first. Hare Krishna, Agari Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much for that very honest and transparent rendition of today's verse. My question relates to not promoting the lowest standard, because sex, violence, these are moral issues. What ought to be done, what ought not to be done, so that you can have a good destination at the end of this lifetime. So, what do you think of the lack of knowledge when it comes to how the moral framework within the Vedas works by not talking about the lower standards? So, for example, when it comes to like violence, yes, it's allowed that Kshatriyas commit violence in terms of hunting to perfect the art, but the Vedas also don't shortcut the reaction. So it's not that there's no reaction. There will be a reaction, but it's known that, okay, as a Kshatriya, I can do this. Similarly, even when it comes to sex, for example, with Chitraketu, yes, you want a son so that to inherit, your vast kingdom, but the consequence of him wanting the son so much, it's well described in the Bhagavatam, how, the co-wives poisoned the son. And so the consequence of his action, of his desire, even though it was legitimate, it's still illustrated. So what do you think within ISKCON and the various positions that have been adopted on this issue, Nyamagraha and Nyamagraha? So in other words, one extreme is that just promote the high standard, and then as a new devotee, that's all you know, and then you struggle with this tension for a long time in terms of trying to move forward in the Krishna consciousness. And then obviously there's the Nyamagraha side where you're just lax and you don't actually make progress and all. In other words, the ignorance on how a Vedic society solves this moral tension creates an existential tension within the practitioner because of that ignorance of how the actual moral framework works. So my question really boils down to: can one make a legitimate argument that there needs to be more education on actually how the moral framework works? Because some devotees, including myself, just couldn't figure it out in the beginning between Nyamagraha and Nyamagraha.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, Prabhu. It seems that you're implying that there should be some discussion, that there are qualified morality. Just like violence is moral with certain qualification, if it's to protect the Vaishnavas or to protect Krishna's interests. So similarly, there is qualified moral sexual pleasure within marriage, as Srila Prabhupada said in this purport to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, text 34. Was it 34? Yeah. So I think that devotees should talk about how there is more broad and accommodating standards that are not the highest. I think that it takes a certain finesse and expertise of any speaker to present any topic, and especially topics about sex, to be able to encourage everyone to progress, but also to not quit Krishna consciousness just because they struggle. And the fact of the matter is, there have been too many people, especially young men, who think that just because I'm struggling with sex means I have to quit Krishna consciousness. So many brahmacharis lost because they only know the highest standard. That's all that we do. You're in the brahmacharya, all you talk about is the highest standard. Don't even look at women. I have no attraction. It's all Maya. And then as soon as you're struggling with sex, just quit. I've lost a lot of friends that way because young men, they think because I have attachment or I have some bad habits, masturbation, pursuing women illegitimately, that therefore I can't practice Krishna consciousness. And the fact of the matter is, one can progress towards the highest standard of being completely free from sexual activity. So we've missed out on those devotees now because they weren't encouraged to progress. Maybe they weren't aware of or not encouraged in the lower standards, but being progressive. So I think that is a shame, and I think that your point is so important. That people can be educated in a broader context of the morality of the activity, but always be encouraged towards the higher standard. And that just takes expertise in whatever particular speaker there is, or that person's guru, or their mentors. And of course, it's on them to also open up and say, I'm struggling, to open up to somebody who can encourage them to progress, even though they're struggling with a lower standard. So I think there's a few things that play there, but I absolutely agree that in many contexts, that should be discussed.
Thanks, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Qualified morality. We have two other hands raised. I don't know. I mean, Kala Swarupa raised his hand first. And then, of course, we'd like to have Taraka to be the last word. So I hope that's all right that Kala Swarupa Prabhu goes first. Is that all right, Taraka Prabhu?
Of course.
All right, well, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, O servant of the form of time.
Okay. So I have a comment and a question uh, about Bon Ashram. My comment is basically
I might not be
that,
the person for the question, but okay, let's try.
well, you talked about it. Uh, because, you brought up, and I've heard this idea elsewhere, uh, that, oh, we should focus on first half preaching instead of focusing so much on the second half.
That's my opinion, yeah.
I guess my differing opinion is that second half preaching is first half preaching. That the distinction between the two is, in some sense, artificial, because the whole point of the Von Ashram system is to make a social milieu or a social system that is more favorable for chanting Hare Krishna. And even if we do so imperfectly at first, I don't think that we should just say, the seventh generation devotees in the future will handle it. That even if imperfectly performed, that uh, it is better to think about these things and how we will actually do it, because it will actually help more people come to Krishna consciousness in the future. Because really, people coming in a social system that is so against the principles of devotional service is the exception rather than the rule, in my view. And that we need to try to make a social system as much as possible that is favorable for chanting Hare Krishna and performing devotional service. And Prabhupada gave that in his books as Bhagavad Von Ashram. Which leads me into my question, or perhaps it's a comment vaguely disguised as a question.
Thanks for being honest.
Yeah, which is, you're talking about how in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dismisses Varnashram Dharma as external. So I guess the question is for specifically the members of the Hare Krishna movement, is the establishment of Varnashram Dharma external? Because ultimately, the standard of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate internal activity, is following the orders of the spiritual master. And it's clear that Prabhupada wanted the establishment of Varnashram Dharma. So is it for the members of the Hare Krishna movement, is Varnashram Dharma, or the establishment of it at least, not external? Is it devotional service also?
To your first point, yes, well taken. I agree that there should be discussion of Varnashrama, and it is important. And of course, if it's not discussed, then it won't happen, even 7 generations from now. So I do agree with you there. I just want to temper the expectations and address those who might feel like I'm failing in Krishna consciousness because I'm failing in Varna and Ashrama. And maybe nobody's told you that, but I've had plenty of people tell me that. And it's heartbreaking because we go back to Godhead by chanting Hare Krishna, not by the performance of Varna and Ashrama. And yes, of course, if we had effective Varna and Ashrama, it would be very attractive. And it would give more substance to the preaching. So I absolutely agree with you there, Prabhu. As to the second point, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is dismissing Varnashrama as external. Does that mean is it external if we try to apply that in ISKCON? No, I don't think so. I think that we can't use everything for devotional service and then it becomes spiritual. But also, our culture is about progress. Not everybody's at the same level. We have to progress from the level of complete attachment to material existence to gradual detachment to complete detachment and attachment to Krishna. There's a progress from Shraddha to Prem, right? There's Shraddha, and then there's Sadhu Sangha, then there's Bhajana Kriya, and then there's Anartha Nivritti, and then there's Nishta. And some are at the level where they must renounce Varna and Ashrama. And I think most of us are not. Some, they get to the point where it's no longer favorable to their practice of Krishna consciousness, that they no longer need to be bound in any way by that. And so they don't have to do it. And for them, it's external. But another thing, Kalasura Prabhu, that just because it's external doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it or try to do it. It's said elsewhere in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I won't be able to find the verse right now, that even for those pure devotees who are beyond attachment to the body and the bodily concept of life in the form of Varna and Ashrama, still, although within their heart, they're just engaged in spontaneous loving service to Radha and Krishna and Vrindavan, still externally, they perform all the functions and rules and regulations of their status of life to set an example for others. So I think that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's dismissal of Varnashrama as echobhaya, external, doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It means that we should be more focused on pleasing Krishna by chanting his holy names and encouraging others to chant his other name, coming to the standard of pure devotion demonstrated by the gopis. That's my understanding of the conversation between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy. Do you agree?
Yes. So obviously the highest standard is the love of the gopis for Krishna. But I guess kind of my perspective as well is that we shouldn't dismiss Varnashram as too difficult and then say that attaining that level of love is easy. All right, because actually the attaining the level of love of the gopis is in some sense more rare.
It's rare, yes.
Than the attainment of Varna and Ashram. Of course, that is the ultimate goal is the love of the gopis. But I guess my main view on things is that those who are at that level can relish that taste. For me, I am very much not at the level of the love that between Krishna and the gopis. So I'll focus as much as possible in the current age on whatever form of the Dharma for the Varna and Ashram that I find myself in, and try to make gradual advancement in that way.
Your point is well said and well taken, Prabhu, and I will contemplate it and contemplate your example as well. Fortunately, I am nobody's guru, so you don't have to agree with me at all. I'm just expressing an opinion about the comparison between first half of Prabhupada's mission and second half. That's just my opinion. All
Thank
right,
you for
Tarika
the,
Prabhu, thank you for waiting so patiently. We'd love to hear your conclusive thoughts on all of these things. Are you there, Tarika Prabhu?
I'm sorry, I failed to unmute.
Oh, we're a bit over time though. So if anyone needs to go, feel free. But we can all benefit from hearing what Tarika Prabhu has to say, of course,
Try
if you
to-
have time.
With regards to Varnashram, my gosh, so much we could discuss. Srila Prabhupada did specifically say that Varnashram is actually not for the devotees. Varnashram is for the non-devotees. And our interest in Varnashram um, is to establish that for the benefit of the non-devotees, as a means to gradually elevate them to Krishna consciousness. But for devotees, the devotees are beyond Varnashram, they're transcendental to Varnashram. But having said that, Krishna explains in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita how we are to conduct ourselves. It speaks about the prescribed duties of Varnashram in the course of trying to persuade Arjuna to fight. And he explains that for those who are in knowledge, though they have no prescribed duty according to Varna and Ashram, they nonetheless will set the example for those who are not in knowledge, because what greater men do, lesser men will follow. And where is it now?
Yeah, I know the verse in chapter 6. Can't remember exactly which one.
We have the text 29 of the third chapter. Prakriterguna samudhasa jante guna karmasu krishna vidomandan krishna vidnavichalayat. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached, but the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior to the former's lack of knowledge. That's not what I was looking for. Anyway, Krishna instructs that that the wise should not unsettle the minds of the ignorant. They should not be instructed to to give up prescribed duties. But for the devotees, prescribed duties are unnecessary. And the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, of course, is found in the 18th chapter. In text 66, Krishna says to abandon all those varieties of religion, including the prescribed duties of Varnashram, Sarvadharman, he says. And if there was any question as to what he was referring to, it's clarified by Srila Prabhupada in the purport that he's talking about actually everything that he described previously in Bhagavad Gita, including the prescribed duties of Varnashram. So anyway, the takeaway is we want a Varnashram. We want to set an example of Varnashram, but for the purpose of benefiting the conditioned souls, the non-devotees. It's not for the devotees. The devotees are, Vaishnava is above Varnashram. Varnashram is a lower platform of activity. It's not our thing, and therefore it was rejected by Lord Chaitanya. It's what more can I say? But the Vaishnavas are above Varna and Ashram. Nonetheless, Srila Prabhupada established, at least on a rudimentary level, he established the ashrams within our movement. Varna, not so much. He encouraged Varna, but he did establish the 4 ashrams within ISKCON. Anyway, so we're running out of time, and I want to talk a little bit about these standards of sex life, which you have described. And I've heard you talk about this before, and to be honest, I become a little concerned because I get the impression that you are of the opinion that that there are in fact 2 or perhaps more acceptable standards for sex life for the devotees. And I'm not entirely clear on what your position is, but my understanding from Srila Prabhupada is that there is one standard, which is that there no sex life except within the household ashram exclusively for the purpose of procreation once in a month. That is the standard, the only standard. Everything else is just a fallen condition. It's just simply Grihamedi life if it's going on in a marital situation. It's not the Grihastha ashram. And Srila Prabhupada did recognize, of course, that some individuals will not be able to meet that standard. But he certainly was not going to condone that. I had a conversation with Dave Amriteswamy, which you may find interesting. We were talking, he actually brought up the topic of, he had just come from some meetings that he was talking about some of the many controversies that he has to contend with, and the difficulties, differences of opinion that devotees have even amongst the leadership. And he gave an example, which was the issue of standards of adherence to the principles of brahmacharya in the household ashram, because brahmacharya is practiced, supposed to be practiced in the household ashram. Grihastha is supposed to be household of brahmacharya. Srila Prabhupada used that term, that phrase, not infrequently. And what Devamata Swami was talking about, what some were advocating for an acceptance of various standards, lower standards, the absence of a strict adherence to the principles of brahmacharya in the household ashram. And the opinion that he expressed to me was that we should advocate for the highest standard because human nature is such that you try to establish a higher standard, people will fall short of that. And so if we establish or condone a lower standard, then they will fall short of that standard, or it will become the standard. So what he was suggesting was that we should be simply advocating for the highest standard, and maybe people will rise to that higher standard, or they may fall short of it. But if we don't promote the higher standard, then we can expect that people will do less than that. Anyway,
I absolutely agree. I thought that I had said exactly that as I heard it from Gurudev. He said we should always promote the highest standard. The lower standard will happen automatically.
Yeah. All right. So in my discussion with Srila Prabhupada, he went a step further. There is no lower standard. There is only the one standard. There's just the higher standard. Everything else is just just fallen.
Well, I just quoted Srila Prabhupada several times saying otherwise.
Well,
I share these quotes with you.
Yeah, I heard your quotes, and and my conclusion was, with all due respect, I think you were misinterpreting what he was saying. When he speaks about these things, because he was very, very clear. At least for an initiated devotee, you take initiation, you promise, you make a promise, no illicit sex life. And he defines what constitutes illicit sex life. Any sex life outside of marriage or within marriage, any sex life which is not expressly and exclusively for the purpose of procreation, and then also only once in a month for that purpose of procreation. So anything short of that, a devotee is breaking his initiation vows, and it is unacceptable. So he was very clear about that. He was not suggesting that for an initiated devotee that it's okay if you can't meet that higher standard. His position was that anyone who follows his instruction as guru, anyone who follows the instructions of their spiritual master, chants 16 rounds, or if necessary, you chant more. If you're agitated, you chant more rounds. You're not chanting. But his position was that anyone can follow that standard. Anyone can follow the higher standard, and they simply need to be encouraged to do that, because if you are sincere, you will be empowered to do that. Practically, if I can do it, I promise you, anyone can do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it, and I can do it. You will not find someone, more profoundly attached to sex life than myself. But I can follow the principles of brahmacharya, not by dint of my own prowess, but because there is empowerment. You get help if you are sincere and you sincerely endeavor to follow the instructions of our founder Acharya. You are empowered to do it, and it becomes easy. It actually becomes easy. It's no longer a struggle. You are actually uplifted, and that's what Srila Prabhupada taught us, that because we don't have the strength, we don't have the power individually to perform such austerities and to adhere to that very high standard. It requires some empowerment that comes easily if you surrender to your spiritual master, follow his instructions, and you make that endeavor to strictly adhere to your vows. You get help to follow those vows. Otherwise, you would not be able to do it. But there is empowerment that comes. So and that's the process. If we don't understand that, then we may think that that there's a need to accommodate people who are unable to do that. And in my own preaching, what I've seen is that there is a necessity to try to accommodate those who fall short. What is required is that they be encouraged to understand that actually you can do this. You can do this. You yourself alone can't do this, but with the proper support, you absolutely can do it. And you need to understand what the process is for getting that support. And if you're sincere by following carefully, you will be uplifted. You'll be uplifted. You'll be held up, buoyed above the modes of material nature. You'll be untouched, like a lotus flower in water. water resistant. Water just beads up, rolls right off. You won't be affected. That happens for a sincere devotee who endeavors to follow strictly. But if from the get-go your attitude is that I can't do this, then absolutely you will not be able to do it. You need to understand that you absolutely can do it. You can do it. It is the nature of the soul. It's in you intrinsically. You can do this. You absolutely can do this. And you have the help of Guru and Krishna. So of course you can do it. You absolutely can do it. Never tell yourself that you can't do it. If you think that you can't do it, then you absolutely will not be able to do it. But you can. You absolutely can do that. And so many have done that. So many have been elevated from a very, very fallen condition and have been able to follow very, very strictly in spite of a dreadful background. It can be done by anyone, even the most fallen can be elevated. That's the glory of Krishna consciousness. It can elevate even the most fallen easily. Krishna is absolutely capable of elevating anyone, but you have to submit to the process. Then you get Krishna's help. Anyway.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. We're so encouraged, yes, by your example and by your promoting the highest standard. I absolutely agree. And seeing you, I know that it's possible. I would just like, just in addition, to remind especially the young men in the room that even if you don't meet the highest standard, you can still be Krishna conscious. That's all. But we should all aspire for the highest standard. Absolutely. Of course, there's so much more we can say about the material world's most popular activity, but I think we've done enough for this morning. There will be plenty more as we continue in this chapter in the discussion of Ajamila. So thank you, Taraka Prabhu. Thank you all Prabhus for tuning in. You're now free to enjoy a Krishna conscious day. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitya Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo.